Have you ever meant well as a leader and still got it wrong? You thought you were being clear, but people experienced you as abrupt. You thought you were being decisive, but they felt shut down. You thought you were creating alignment, but somehow no one really took ownership. The gap between what I intended and how I actually landed is one of the most important gaps in leadership. And it's a tricky one because most of us judge ourselves by our intent. We think, that's not what I meant, and maybe it isn't. But leadership doesn't work only through intention, it works through impact. And that's where the second dimension comes in. In the last video, we looked at self-awareness, the ability to notice your own patterns, reactions, assumptions, and impulses. And this time, we move outward. Because once I can notice what's happening in me, the next question is, what effect am I having on you? That is the heart of LD2, impact awareness. And honestly, this is where leadership gets uncomfortably real, because I can have a beautiful story about myself in my own head and still create tension, confusion, and silence in the room without fully realizing it. So in this video, I want to explore what impact awareness really is, why it matters so much for the trust and truth-telling, and what goes wrong when a leader doesn't develop it. Hi, I'm Pietro Pazzi, for those that don't know me yet. I spent 30 years as an executive in global leadership roles. I saw brilliant leaders burn out, lose themselves, or hit invisible ceilings. I realized what was missing wasn't more strategy or tactics, it was depth work on the inner operating system. So I returned to my roots in psychosynthesis, and now I help leaders integrate their inner world with their leadership impact. The purpose of LD2 is this: to understand impact, not just intent, strengthen trust and trust flow, and create relational conditions for shared ownership and candid feedback. There's a lot in there, but the phrase I keep coming back to is this: impact, not just intent. Because intent is private, impact is lived. Intent happens inside me. Impact happens between us. And leadership lives in the space between people. This dimension asks some very honest questions. Do people tell me the truth early? Do they feel safe disagreeing with me? Can they challenge me without worrying about my reactions? Do I create more openness in the room or more caution? That's a very different kind of leadership than, am I a good person, or did I mean well? Most leaders do mean well, at least most of the time. That's not really the issue. The issue is whether your leadership creates the conditions where honesty can move, tensions can be addressed, and ownership can actually take root. Because if people don't trust how you will respond, the truth starts arriving late. And once truth starts arriving late, leadership gets expensive. In this model, LD2 is shaped mainly by two capabilities. The first is human connection. This is about acknowledgement, staying relational under tension, humility, compassion, and letting go through timely repair. I find this one incredibly important because leadership is tested most clearly, not when things are easy, but when there's friction. When someone disappoints you, when a colleague pushes back publicly, when there's mistrust in the room, when feedback is awkward, when emotions rise. A leader strong in human connection can stay in a relationship even when the conversation gets uncomfortable. Not performatively warm, not artificially nice, but genuinely relational. They don't go cold. They don't become punishing. They don't collapse into appeasement either. They stay connected and direct. The second primary capability is alignment. This is about building trust and communicating in a way that creates clarity, ownership, commitment, and especially across differences. And that matters because relationships on their own are not enough. You can have a very friendly team with very little ownership. You can have warmth without clarity. You can have agreement in the room and confusion outwards. Alignment turns good intention into shared movement. It makes clear, what are we deciding? Who owns what? What does success look like? What happens next? Then there's the secondary overlap with grounding. This is the capacity to stay centered and congruent when emotionally challenged. So the leader does not punish dissent, withdraw, or turn sharp. That overlap is easy to miss, but it matters enormously because when we're challenged, many of us don't lose our values in a dramatic way. We lose them in subtle ways. Our tone tightens, our questions become loaded, our listening disappears. We say the right words, but everyone can see the edge underneath. That's the moment grounding protects the relationship. A leader strong in LD2 tends to behave in some very recognizable ways. Firstly, they check how their message lands and adapt without becoming vague. That's important because adapting does not mean watering everything down. It doesn't mean losing firmness. It means staying clear while staying connected. They notice when something hasn't landed well and they adjust. Secondly, they invite disagreement and handle challenge without retaliation or performance. I think this one is one of the clearest signals of maturity in leadership. Can people disagree with you without paying for it later? Not just formally, not just in theory, in practice. Can they raise bad news early? Can they question an idea? Can they say, I don't think this is working? If they can't, then your leadership may be producing compliance rather than trust. Thirdly, they acknowledge what is real, including tensions, rather than smoothing it over. This really matters. Some leaders are so eager to keep things nice that they talk around what everybody already knows is happening. Tension is there, the distrust is there, the frustration is there, and yet nobody names it. But mature leaders can say calmly and cleanly, I think there's tension in the room. I think we're actually aligned here or misaligned. I suspect some concerns have not been voiced. That creates relief more often than discomfort because at least something real is being acknowledged. Fourth, they stay relational in conflict. They stay connected and direct, not cold, not appeasing. This balance is harder than it sounds. Some leaders mistake directness and toughness and become harsh. Others mistake kindness for harmony and become avoidant. Impact-aware leaders can tell the truth without cutting the relationship. Fifth, they repair quickly. When trust frays and can let go of residual resentment. This one is huge because trust does fray. People misunderstand each other. Things get missed. Someone gets hurt. A decision lands badly. The question is not whether rupture happens. It does. The question is, how quickly do we repair? A strong leader does not leave relational damage sitting like damp on the wall. They address it early, honestly, and without theatrics. 6, they create clarity about decisions. What are we deciding? Who owns it? What does success look like? That sounds simple, but astonishingly, how teams have meetings with a foggy sense of agreement and no real ownership. And finally, they build trust through consistency. People don't have to guess who they'll get today. That line really stays with me because inconsistent leaders create low-grade anxiety. The the team spends energy reading mood instead of getting the work done. When impact awareness is underdeveloped, a few patterns usually show up. The first is that truth arrives late. People filter updates. Bad news gets softened or delayed. Risks are managed politically instead of discussed directly. And often the leader says, "Why didn't anyone tell me sooner?" But the deeper question is, what made it difficult to tell me? The second pattern is that meetings are polite but not honest. Everything sounds fine on the surface. People nod. No one pushes back. Everything is terribly reasonable. Then after the meetings, the real conversation starts in the corridors, side chats, or in private messages. That's never a good sign. Third, conflict goes underground and returns as resistance. When disagreement cannot be expressed, it doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It becomes delay, half-hearted follow-through, passive resistance, quiet non-cooperation. And then leaders misread the problem as laziness or lack of commitment, when in fact the issue is often unspoken tension. And finally, alignment is declared, but ownership is thin and follow-through is brittle. People leave with the language of agreement, but not the weight of commitment. They have heard the decision, but they have not really taken hold of it. That kind of false alignment looks tidy in the moment and very costly later. So, impact awareness is leadership capacity to understand that how I land matters just as much as what I mean. It helps create trust. It improves truth flow. It makes ownership more real. And it allows honesty to come into the room earlier than when it can still help. Without it, teams become careful. With it, teams become candid. And candid teams are healthier, faster, and more resilient. In the next video, we'll look at LD3, systems awareness, the ability to see beyond individuals and isolated problems, and understand the wider patterns, structures, and forces shaping performance. If this perspective speaks to you and you want to develop your leadership from the inside out, explore my depth leadership coaching at pietropazzi.com. You can also book a 30-minute complimentary exploratory chat with me. You'll find both links in the description. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video.